The first thing Kieran Wolf saw was the smoke. Not the thin, gray ribbon of a cooking fire, but the thick, ugly black of something that had burned too hot, too long. By the time he crested the last rise and looked down into the little valley, he knew what he was going to find. The house was gone, burned to its stone foundation. The barn had collapsed in on itself, beams charred and twisted. Chickens lay scattered, necks broken. A milk cow lay on her side, belly bloated, eyes clouded. In the yard, 4 bodies in a neat row, like someone had taken the time to line them up before they rode away. A man, a woman, 2 boys that hadn't even lived long enough to shave. This wasn't a raid for supplies. This was a message. Kieran swung down from his horse, jaw tight, and walked the yard like a man reading a story in tracks and blood. He'd spent 15 years as a scout for the army, and another 5 alone in these mountains. He knew what bullet holes looked like. He knew what execution looked like. He crouched beside the smaller boy, no more than 6 or 7, and closed the child's eyes with a rough, careful hand. Then he bowed his head once. Not a prayer, just respect. He was turning toward the well when he heard it. A sound so soft he almost thought it was the wind. A broken, ragged little sob coming from behind the ruins of the house. Kieran stilled, every sense sharpening, and followed the sound to a low wooden door half buried in scorched earth. A root cellar. The door had been barricaded from the inside. He could see where hands had shoved boxes, barrels, broken furniture up against it. Someone had tried very hard not to be found. Kieran set his rifle aside and knocked once with his knuckles. "Who's in there?" His voice was deep, steady, the voice of a man who'd seen a lot and still stood his ground. "My name's Kieran Wolf. I'm alone. Raiders are gone." Silence. Then a whisper that sounded like it had been dragged over broken glass. "How do I know you're not lying?" He'd heard that tone before. In burned-out settlements, in ruined camps, the voice of someone who had watched their whole world die. "Because," he said quietly, "if I meant you harm, I wouldn't knock." There was a small, shuddering breath. "I can't get out. I'm not strong enough. I've been trying for 3 days." 3 days? Kieran's jaw clenched. "All right, you stay back from the door. I'll do the heavy work." It took 10 minutes of prying and cursing and putting his shoulder into it before the barricade finally gave. The door flew open on rusted hinges, and cool cellar air rushed up around him. She was in the far corner, big body pressed into the dirt like she was trying to disappear into it. Over 300 pounds, if he had to guess. Brown hair in a wild tangle. Dress torn. Face swollen from crying. Eyes like bruised glass. "Please," she whispered, flinching from the light. "Everyone I loved is dead. Don't hurt me too." Kieran looked at her, at the graves waiting outside, at the ashes of the life she'd had. Something old and hard moved in his chest. "Who did this to you?" he asked, voice shaking with rage he didn't bother to hide. "Tell me who did this, and I swear on my life, no one lays a hand on you again." "The ashes are still hot, and the silence in that valley is deafening. Kieran Wolf has made a promise, and he's a man who never breaks one. If this story gave you chills, hit that like button and share this with someone who loves a dark western. Tell me in the comments,
What would you do if you were in Kieran's boots?
For a long moment she didn't move. Kieran held out his hand, palm steady, patient as stone. He knew better than to rush someone who'd survived hell. He'd seen shell-shocked survivors bolt like rabbits when pressed too hard. "My name is Kieran Wolf," he said gently. "I'm not one of the men who hurt you. I tracked smoke from miles out. If they were nearby, I'd know." Her breath hitched. Her gaze darted past him toward the ruined yard. "They killed my family," she whispered. "My mama, my papa, my little brothers. I heard everything." Tears welled and spilled again, carving clean streaks through soot on her cheeks. "I should have died with them." "No," Kieran said, voice sharp enough to cut. "You survived. That's not a failing." She flinched at his tone, and he softened it immediately. "Come on, Rosalind. Let me help you up." She blinked. "How did you know my name?" "You cried it when I was breaking the door," he said simply. "Rosalind, it suits you." A flush moved across her face. Embarrassment, disbelief, maybe even shame. She stared at his outstretched hand like it was a trick. "I'm heavy," she said, throat tightening. "You won't be able to lift me." Kieran huffed a quiet breath, not unkind. "I've carried dying soldiers, full-grown men in armor, and once a wounded elk down a ravine. You let me worry about weight." Her lower lip trembled. Slowly, hesitantly, she placed her hand in his. Kieran braced and pulled. She came up with a gasp, legs shaking beneath her, but he steadied her with both hands. Up close, she was taller than he expected, broad-shouldered, soft-bodied, flushed from crying and dehydration. A woman the world would call too much, but whose presence filled the space like something important. The moment she was upright, dizziness overtook her and she sagged forward. Kieran caught her before she fell. "Easy," he murmured, supporting her weight without strain. "You're starved and dehydrated." "Haven't slept, haven't eaten. You're not meant to be standing." She clutched his shirt weakly. Don't leave me here." "I'm not leaving you anywhere," he said, and meant it. "Let's get you some water. Slow sips." He guided her out of the cellar and into the brutal sunlight. She stiffened when she saw the bodies laid out in the yard. Her knees gave a little, and Kieran positioned himself between her and the sight. "Don't look yet," he said softly. "We'll bury them properly, but not while you're shaking on your feet." She covered her face with both hands. "They died because of me." "No," Kieran said, voice hardening. "They died because 7 cowards decided murder was easier than honest work. Their choices, not yours." "I hid," she whispered. "I let them die alone." "You survived," he corrected. "And they couldn't break through that barricade because you built it. That's why you're alive." She began to cry again, but this time quietly, hollowly. Kieran let grief needed room. When she steadied, he handed her his canteen. Her hands shook so badly he had to support it with his own. "What happened?" he asked. She took a breath that sounded like it scraped her lungs. 7 men rode up, said they were prospectors. Papa invited them to dinner. It's what we always did. Mama said hospitality was a Christian duty. But then they saw her jewelry box. It belonged to her grandmother." Her face contorted. "Papa said it wasn't for sale. One of them laughed, said everything's for sale if you point a gun at it." Kieran's teeth ground together. "They shot Papa first," Rosalind whispered,
Mama screamed. They shot her. My brothers ran. They shot them too. I tried to fight one, bit him, and ran. I barely made it to the cellar before they came after me.
What did they do?
Beat on the door, tried to pry it open. One said killing me wasn't worth the bullet.
Her voice cracked.
He called me a fat pig, said I'd die in the dark anyway.
Kieran's vision went hot around the edges. He'd seen cruelty before, but something about this, men murdering children, mocking the last survivor as they tried to burn her family alive, stoked a fury so deep it felt carved into his bones. He forced his voice steady. "Rosalind, did you hear any names?"
Dutch,
she whispered.
and Red, and the leader, tall man, gray beard, wearing a torn cavalry coat.
Kieran froze. Dutch Malone, Red Carter, and the one they called Sergeant, kicked out of the army for brutality even the frontier couldn't justify. He knew this gang. He knew what they did. And he knew what they would do again if someone didn't stop them. Rosalind watched him, fear flickering in her eyes.
Why are you helping me? I'm nobody. I'm fat, I'm useless,
Kieran stepped closer, sudden and fierce. "You are not useless," he said sharply. "You are alive. You fought, you ran, you survived something most people never would. I don't care about your size. I care about what was done to you." He paused. "And I care about making sure it never happens to anyone else again." Rosalind's breath caught.
What are you saying?
Kieran Wolf looked at the burned home, at the graves waiting to be dug, and at the woman who had lost everything except the fire in her trembling voice. "I'm saying," he answered quietly, "that I'm going to track the Dutch Malone gang." He met her eyes. "And if you want vengeance, if you want justice, I'll be your vengeance." He held her gaze, waiting. "Do you want that, Rosalind?" She swallowed, tears spilling, voice breaking.
Yes,
she whispered.
God help me. Yes.
Kieran nodded once, like a vow. "Then come with me. We start by burying your family." The sun had dipped low by the time they finished digging the graves. Kieran did the heavy work. Rosalind was still too weak, but he let her place each wildflower, let her say each name. When she spoke her brothers' names, her voice broke into pieces. Kieran didn't touch her, didn't rush her. Grief had its own pace. When she finally rose from the last mound, she swayed. He stepped forward without thinking, steadying her with one hand at her back. "We need to get moving," he said softly. "Night falls fast in these foothills."
Where are we going?
"My place, a day's ride north." He looked at her pale face. "We'll take it slow." Rosalind's gaze drifted back toward the ruins of her home, toward the ashes that would never stop smoldering in her memory. "There's nothing left here for you," Kieran said gently. "Come on." Their horse, his big bay gelding, stood waiting. Rosalind hesitated as she looked at it.
I'm too heavy,
she murmured.
I'll break him.
Kieran gave a short, quiet sound, not quite a laugh, more like disbelief. "This horse carried me and a quarter wagon of supplies up a canyon last winter. He'll manage. But, Rosalind," he said, voice firm but not unkind, "you are not a burden. Not to me, not to him. Let me help you." Her throat tightened. For years, everyone had treated her as weight, trouble, too much. Now this man, scarred, stoic, terrifying to look at, held out his hand like he expected her to take it.
She did. With surprising ease, Kieran boosted her into the saddle. Then he mounted behind her, solid and warm. The moment she felt his chest against her back, her breath hitched. Not from fear, though some part of her trembled, but from something she couldn't name. Kieran noticed her tension but didn't mistake it. "I'm here to keep you steady," he said quietly. "Nothing else." She nodded, though he couldn't see it.
He clicked his tongue, and the horse moved forward, carrying them away from the graves, the ash, the nightmare. The first hour passed in silence. Rosalind leaned back carefully, exhausted, letting his steady warmth keep her upright. When her head dropped once, twice, finally resting against his shoulder, Kieran didn't shift away. He simply adjusted his hold around her waist and kept riding. As twilight deepened, the wind turned cold. Rosalind shivered, and Kieran's voice came low behind her ear. "Lean into me." She hesitated. "Trust me," he said. Those two words, simple, quiet, hit her harder than any she'd heard in months. She leaned. He wrapped his arms tighter. The rhythm of the horse, the sway of the saddle, the steady drum of Kieran's heart against her spine, they lulled something inside her. For the first time since the massacre, she felt herself drifting toward sleep. "Don't sleep yet," he murmured. "We're close. Let me get the fire going first." He nudged the horse into a clearing under tall pines and dismounted, then helped her down with hands gentle for their size. When her legs nearly buckled, Kieran caught her again. "You're running on fumes," he said quietly. "Sit." She obeyed, sinking onto a fallen log while he moved with efficient skill, gathering wood, striking flint, coaxing flame into a blaze that warmed the whole clearing. Rosalind watched him work. Something about the way he moved, grounded, capable, made her chest ache. How long had it been since she'd felt safe enough to watch another person without flinching? Too long. When the fire was steady, Kieran pulled a blanket from his saddlebag and draped it over her shoulders. The gesture was so unexpectedly gentle that she had to blink hard to keep from crying again. "Drink this," he said, handing her a tin cup with warm water. "Small sips." "I'm not helpless," she muttered, embarrassed. "I know." He sat across from her, firelight painting harsh lines into softness on his scarred face. "But you're recovering from starvation and shock. If I treat that lightly, you'll get sick. And I'm not losing you after I just got you out of that cellar." Rosalind swallowed. "I don't understand you," she whispered. "Why you're doing all this?" Kieran met her eyes, steady, unwavering. "Because someone should have been there for you 3 days ago, and they weren't." She looked away. "I'm not easy to help." "What does that mean?" She gestured at herself. "Look at me." "I am," he said. "And you're not seeing what I'm seeing." Her breath caught. "What do you see?" "A woman who fought back, who bit a man trying to hurt her, who survived alone in the dark. Weight has nothing to do with strength, Rosalind." She stared at him, shaken. Kieran shifted his posture, elbows on his knees, expression turning colder, sharper. "And I see something else." "What?" "Someone the Dutch Malone gang will come after again if they learn she's alive." Rosalind's blood ran cold. "Why would they?" "Because survivors talk. Survivors point lawmen, and that gang kills every witness they leave behind." His jaw tightened. "Which is why you're not going back to town. Not tonight, not next week. They'll have ears and eyes on every road." He leaned forward. "You stay with me. I'll train you.
strengthen you, teach you things that keep you alive." Her voice trembled. "Why do you care if I live?" Kieran didn't hesitate. "Because I failed the people I loved once," he said, "and I'm not failing you." The fire snapped between them. She looked into his eyes and saw the truth there, raw, unhidden. Maybe she wasn't alone anymore. Maybe this mountain man, scarred, grieving, dangerous, wasn't just offering safety. Maybe he was offering purpose. "Kieran?" she whispered.
"Yeah? When do we start?" His answer was a single word, low as thunder on distant hills. "Tomorrow." Kieran's cabin appeared just after sunrise the next morning, tucked against a ridge of granite, half hidden by towering firs, smoke curling from a stone chimney. It looked sturdy, practical, built by a man who trusted wood and rock more than towns or people. Rosalind swayed in the saddle as they rode up the slope. Exhaustion clung to her like a second skin. But when she saw the cabin, something loosened in her chest. It wasn't much, just a single-room structure with a small lean-to attached, but compared to the ruins she'd fled, it looked like a sanctuary. Kieran dismounted first, then turned to help her down. His hands spanned her waist, warm and steady, lowering her as though she weighed nothing at all. "You're shaking," he said.
"I'm fine."
"You're exhausted," he corrected. "That's different." Inside, the cabin felt surprisingly warm and lived in. A long table ran along one wall, covered with maps, tools, and an old rifle being cleaned in pieces. Shelves held books, jars of dried herbs, and neatly wrapped parcels of supplies. A bed sat in one corner, blankets folded with military precision. It was a space built for survival, but not for companionship. Kieran lit the fire until it roared, filling the room with heat. "Sit," he instructed, pulling out a sturdy wooden chair beside the hearth. Rosalind sank into it, immediately feeling how the warmth soaked into her bones. Her fingers trembled as she held them to the flames. Kieran unhooked a pot from a hook, filled it with broth he kept reserved for sick seasons, and set it to warm. As he worked, she studied him. He moved with a quiet efficiency, every motion measured, every tool put back exactly where he'd taken it from. He was a big man, broad and scarred, but he handled ladles, herbs, and firewood with surprising gentleness. "That chair should be comfortable," he said without looking at her. "Built it myself last winter."
"It is,"
Rosalind said softly.
"Your cabin is peaceful." "Peaceful," he repeated, almost sounding amused. "That's one word for it." He ladled broth into a bowl and handed it to her. "Small sips," he reminded. She obeyed. The savory warmth coated her throat, easing places inside her she hadn't realized were aching. When she'd eaten half, he finally sat across from her. "Rosalind," he said, "I need to know what you want." She blinked. "What I want?" He nodded. "I can offer you shelter, protection, food, training. All of that is easy. But I need to hear from your own mouth what you want now." She stared into the fire, its flicker reflecting off her tears. "I want them to pay," she whispered. "I want the Dutch Malone gang dead. Every one of them." Kieran didn't flinch. Didn't tell her revenge wasn't the answer, or that killing wouldn't bring her family back. He just nodded. "Then that's what we'll do." She lifted her eyes to him. "But I'm not strong. I'm not fast." "I'm not—" "You survived alone in a cellar for 3 days," he interrupted. You bit a raider hard enough to make him bleed, and you kept your mind in one piece through something that ruins people forever." He leaned forward. "I can make you stronger. I can teach you to shoot, to track, to fight, but you have to commit. Revenge isn't something you chase halfway." She held his gaze. "I'm committed." Kieran nodded. "All right, then we start today." Her eyes widened. "Today?" "You need structure," he said. "Routine. Something to replace the grief until it becomes fuel instead of a weight." He stood, motioning toward the door. "First lesson. Outside." The first days were brutal. Rosalind was weak from hunger, her muscles trembling with even light exertion. But Kieran was patient. He taught her to walk silently, placing her feet carefully on forest ground. He taught her to brace a rifle properly so the recoil didn't bruise her shoulder. He taught her how to breathe, slow, deep, controlled, before pulling a trigger. "You're not fighting your body," he told her one morning as she panted through drills. "You're learning how to use it." "My body isn't built like yours." "Good," he said. "If the two of us fought the same, you'd lose. So don't fight like me." He showed her how to use her weight as leverage, how to drop her center of gravity and drive a man twice her size off balance. "Your size is an advantage in close combat," he said. "Most men don't expect someone heavy to move fast. Use that surprise." Gradually, slowly, she began to feel it. Strength, coordination, her own body becoming something more than a burden. At night, Kieran cooked simple meals. Fish he'd caught, stews he simmered for hours, bread baked in a cast-iron pot. Rosalind helped where she could, though she was shy about taking space in his kitchen. "You're not a guest," he told her one evening. "You live here now." Her chest tightened at that. Live here. Not stay, not hide. Live. One night, a week after she arrived, Rosalind woke screaming. Visions of gunfire and burning walls and her brother's small bodies flashing behind her eyelids. She tried to stifle her sobs, embarrassed, but Kieran was beside her in 2 strides. "It's all right," he murmured, sitting on the edge of the bed he'd insisted she take. "You're safe."
"I can't stop seeing it," she choked. "Every time I close my eyes."
Kieran didn't speak right away. He didn't hush her, didn't tell her to forget. Instead, he placed a large, steady hand over hers. "You won't forget," he said. "That's not how grief works." She swallowed.
"Then how do I live with it?"
"You don't let it drown you," he said. "You give it direction." She looked up at him.
"Revenge?"
"Justice," he corrected. "One step at a time. And until you're ready, I'll carry the weight for both of us." The words hit her like a blow, gentle but devastating.
"Kieran?"
"Yeah?"
"You're the first person," she whispered, "who hasn't looked at me and seen something broken."
His expression tightened, something fierce, protective. "There's nothing broken about you, Rosalind." His voice was low, steady, dangerous in its conviction. "You're grieving, you're hurting, but you are not broken." She thought she might cry again. Instead, she reached out, and he took her hand without hesitation. They stayed like that a long time. Fire burning low, night wind brushing against the shutters. Her fingers curled into his palm, and something fragile, something tentative, began to root itself in the ashes of everything she'd lost. Trust. Not yet love, but a seed of something that could survive the storm. Autumn crept into the mountains slowly. gilding the pines with morning frost and coating the creek stones in thin ice. Rosalind had been living in Kieran's cabin nearly 6 weeks when the first real shift came. Not in the weather, but in him. He grew quieter. Not the ordinary quiet she'd grown used to. The man was naturally sparse with words, but a weighted silence. The kind that meant he was thinking about something he didn't know how to say. It started after a morning of tracking drills. Rosalind had done well, better than she ever had, managing to read a 3-hour-old trail and follow it to a ridge where Kieran had hidden a scrap of cloth as her goal. She expected him to be pleased. Instead, he stared across the valley, jaw clenched, as if he'd seen something far beyond the trees. "Kieran?" she asked. His eyes flicked to her, then away again. "We need to accelerate your training." "Why?" "Because they know." A chill moved through her, not from the cold. "Know what?" "That you survived." She felt the ground tilt under her. "How?" "I was in the cellar the whole time." "Doesn't matter," he said. "Word travels through these territories like smoke. A merchant sees a horse he didn't expect. A trapper notices a rumor. Someone talks too loud in a saloon. One whisper becomes 10. Now Dutch Malone's men know they didn't kill everyone at your homestead." "But Dutch is dead." "Yes," Kieran said. "We killed him. But Dutch wasn't the brain of the gang. He was the face, the brutality, the muscle." "Then who was the leader?" Kieran hesitated. And that hesitation was the first time Rosalind felt the presence of a secret between them. "Kieran," she said carefully, "tell me." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw something raw in him. Guilt? Fear? Regret? "The true leader," he said, "is a man named Boone Maddox. Dutch followed him, the others too. Maddox is smart, strategic, patient, and he hates loose ends." "Do you think he'll come for me?" "I know he will," Kieran said, "and I know why." Rosalind swallowed hard. "Tell me." "He's afraid of you." She blinked. "Afraid of me? Why would a gang leader be afraid of a fat seamstress?" "You saw their faces," Kieran said quietly. "You heard their voices. You can identify them to the law." "The law?" Rosalind let out a bitter laugh. "No marshal is coming out here to chase a gang of mountain raiders." "No," Kieran agreed. "He's not afraid of the law. He's afraid of something else." "What?" Kieran met her eyes. "He's afraid of me." A long silence settled across the cabin, broken only by the fire's crackle. Slowly, Rosalind sat down. "What happened between you and Maddox?" Kieran didn't move, didn't look away. "It was 15 years ago," he said finally. "Not long after my wife and daughter were murdered. I found the raiders who killed them and tracked them for months. Boone Maddox was one of those men." Rosalind's breath caught. "You never told me that." "There are things I don't like remembering," he said. "But yes, he was there, laughing, drinking, taking what wasn't his." "What happened to him?" "I killed every man in that camp except him," Kieran said. "He got away, wounded, but alive. I hunted him for 3 more months, then his trail went cold. Rumor said he left the territory, but I knew better." "You knew he'd come back?" "Yes. Men like Maddox don't quit. They don't hide. They gather others, build strength, wait for the right moment." Rosalind stared at him.
So you think he'll come for us? He won't just come, Kieran said. He'll burn everything in his path to get here. Because he wants revenge? Because he wants dominance, Kieran corrected. He built the Malone gang. Dutch was just a tool. Maddox needed to send a message when he attacked your homestead. Fear is his currency. But why my family? Rosalind asked, her voice cracking. We were nothing. We had nothing.
We never hurt anyone. Why us? Kieran's expression darkened. Because they weren't after valuables. They were after something else. What? Control of the valley. She stared. What are you talking about? He walked to the shelf, pulled down a map, and spread it across the table. This valley, he said, pointing, is one of the only places in the Montana Territory where 3 trails intersect, south from Wyoming, west from Idaho, east from the Dakota lines. Raiders use these routes to move stolen goods. Your family's homestead sat on land Boone Maddox wants. Rosalind felt sick. So they died because they lived on the wrong piece of earth? Kieran's jaw tightened. Yes. She gripped the table to steady herself. Then what do we do? We get ahead of him, Kieran said, before he rebuilds his numbers, before he reaches this cabin, before he turns this valley into his stronghold. Rosalind swallowed. Train me harder. I intend to. Use me as bait if that's what it takes. Kieran stiffened. No. Yes, Rosalind said, her voice breaking only slightly. I won't hide in another cellar hoping someone saves me. I won't let those men take more from me than they already have. If I have a chance to end them, I want it. Kieran turned away from her just for a moment, but Rosalind saw it. Fear. He was afraid for her. Rosalind, he said, his voice rough. I nearly broke apart finding you in that cellar. If I lost you to them now... Kieran, she stepped closer. I'm not your wife. His head snapped toward her. Not yet, she whispered. But you talked like I already belonged to you. Like losing me would be losing something that matters. It would, he said simply. Her breath caught. He wasn't a poetic man. He didn't speak feelings easily. But the truth in those 2 words hit her harder than any vow could. Kieran, she said softly. We can talk about that after the danger passes. But right now, we have one goal. He nodded once. Protect you. No, Rosalind said quietly. Stop Maddox. A long silence followed. Finally, Kieran exhaled, slow and controlled. All right, he said. We do it together. I teach you everything I know. How to shoot, track, fight, survive. How to anticipate a man like Boone Maddox. But understand this. You may be strong, you may be determined, but Maddox is ruthless. If you hesitate, he will kill you. Yes, Rosalind said. I understand. And Rosalind? Yes? When the time comes, I won't hold you back. If you want the final shot, it's yours. She felt it then. Purpose. Direction. Something that pulsed through her veins stronger than fear. He took everything from me, she whispered. But he won't take who I become. Kieran's expression softened, the barest flicker of something tender. No, he said. He won't. But even as he said it, the first warning signs were already closing in.
Tracks in the forest.
A burned-out wagon found 2 miles south. A rancher's family missing. Boone Maddox was already moving, and he wasn't coming quietly. The first snowfall of the season came early. An omen, Kieran said. Snow muffled sound, erased tracks, made enemies harder to detect until they were at your doorstep. For 3 days, the mountains were silent. Too silent. No animal calls, no trader passing through, no wind against the cabin walls. Kieran sensed it immediately. "They're close," he murmured. Rosalind felt it too, an electric tension in the air, as if the forest itself held its breath. She tightened her gloves, checked her rifle, and followed Kieran's instructions with absolute focus. Every night they reinforced the cabin. Every morning they checked the perimeter. She practiced reloading until her fingers were raw. By the 4th day, even the birds had vanished. That evening, Kieran handed her a pistol. "Keep it on you," he said. "Don't remove it, even to sleep." Rosalind nodded. Her heart hammered, but she didn't tremble the way she had weeks ago. The training, the purpose, they had changed something fundamental inside her. Kieran studied her a long moment. "Rosalind," he said quietly, "if anything happens to me..." She stopped him with a shake of her head. "No, don't speak like that." "Rosalind." His voice grounded her. She looked up. "You run," he said. "You take the North Trail. You don't look back." "I won't," she said. "You will." "No, Kieran. I won't leave you." He stepped closer, his voice lowering with something rawer than fear. "I've lost a wife before," he said. "I won't lose another woman I care about." The words stunned her. Care about. Not pity, not obligation, not debt. Care. Soft, unspoken, dangerous. Rosalind swallowed hard. "I care about you too. Enough to fight beside you. Not behind you. Beside." Before he could answer, a sound cut through the silence. A whistle. Low. Mocking. Kieran froze. Rosalind watched his face drain of color. "Maddox," he whispered. Then the window shattered. Gunfire erupted from the tree line, bullets slamming into the cabin walls. Rosalind ducked instinctively as Kieran tackled her to the floor, shielding her with his body. Splinters rained down like hail. "Basement!" Kieran shouted. "Move!" They scrambled toward the trapdoor beneath the bed, but just as Rosalind reached for the handle, a voice boomed from outside. "Kieran Wolf, you cowardly bastard! Come greet your guests." Kieran's eyes flickered with murderous calm. "Stay down." But Rosalind grabbed his arm. "No, tell me what to do." He saw it then. She wasn't panicking. She wasn't the girl he'd pulled from a cellar. She was steady, focused. A woman forged by loss and fire. "All right," he said. "We follow the plan." They split. Rosalind crawled to the corner rifle slit, a narrow opening Kieran had carved years ago for exactly this scenario. She steadied her breath, counted the shadows. Kieran moved to the opposite wall, silently loading shells into his shotgun. The attackers approached slowly, confidently. Rosalind counted 6 figures through the trees, 5 men fanning out and 1 standing tall and still in the open. Boone Maddox. He wore the same long coat as the night he murdered her family, though now it was patched and worn. His beard was streaked with gray,
his face carved with cruelty. "Wolf!" he called. "Come out and die clean, and maybe I'll make it quick for the girl." Rage burned in Rosalind's chest, hot, focused, sharp. She raised her rifle. Not yet, she told herself. Let Kieran start it. Kieran's voice rang out from the opposite slit, cold and steady. "You picked the wrong mountain, Maddox." Maddox laughed. "You killed Dutch. I should thank you. Always hated that loud-mouthed dog." "You should have stayed gone," Kieran said. "And miss killing you myself?" Maddox stepped forward. "No chance." He raised his hand. His men aimed their guns. "Rosalind," Kieran said softly. "On my mark. 3, 2, 1, now!" Gunfire exploded. Kieran's shotgun roared, dropping the man nearest the porch in a spray of snow and blood. Rosalind fired a breath later, her bullet striking a raider in the thigh, sending him crashing to the ground with a howl. She didn't hesitate, didn't flinch, didn't miss. The remaining 4 scattered, ducking behind trees. Maddox did not run. He stared at the cabin with something almost like delight. "Well, well," he drawled. "The fat girl shoots. Didn't think you had it in you." Rosalind braced her rifle again. "I have more in me than you'll ever understand." Maddox grinned, a wolf showing teeth. "Good. I like my prey with fight." He fired. The bullet punched through the wall inches from her cheek, showering her in splinters. Kieran swore under his breath. "He's aiming for you. Stay down." "No." Rosalind lifted her rifle again. "He dies tonight." Gunfire erupted again, shouts, boots crunching in the snow, wood splintering under the assault.
The cabin seemed to pulse with battle, each breath a choice, each movement a promise. Rosalind Hazel Hayes was no longer prey, no longer the girl crying in a cellar, no longer the daughter who hid while her family was murdered. Tonight, she was something else. A hunter, forged beside a man who had suffered as she had. And Boone Maddox, the last ghost of her old life, was finally within reach. The snow whipped sideways across the clearing as the gunfire died down, settling into a tense, dangerous quiet. Rosalind wiped the splinters from her cheek and steadied her breath. Somewhere outside, a wounded raider groaned, then went silent. Kieran checked the last shell in his shotgun. 3 left, Maddox and 2 guns. Rosalind shifted closer, her voice steady. "We can take them." Kieran glanced at her, and even in the dim light, Rosalind saw it. Pride, respect, trust. "Yes," he said, "we can." A boot crunched in the snow. Another. Then a heavy thud against the cabin wall. Maddox wasn't shooting anymore. He was advancing. "Kieran Wolf!" the outlaw barked, his voice booming through the logs. "Quit hiding behind your woman's skirt and face me like a man!" Rosalind saw the way Kieran's jaw tightened, not with anger, but with something like restraint. She touched his arm. "He wants you emotional. Don't give him what killed my father." Kieran blinked, surprised she'd noticed. "You're right." A shadow passed across the window, then another. They were circling. Kieran moved to the back door. Rosalind covered the front, breath even, rifle steady. The lessons he'd taught her echoed in her mind. Don't fear the shot, fear hesitation. A crack split the night. The back door splintered inward as someone rammed it with their shoulder. Kieran fired instantly, dropping the man before he made it inside. 2 left.
Rosalind swung toward the front as Maddox himself hurled his full weight into the main door. The hinges screamed, the beam buckled. "Get behind me," Kieran ordered.
"No!"
Her voice startled both of them. Rosalind stepped forward, not backward, positioning herself directly between Maddox and Kieran. "This is my fight," she whispered. Another slam. The beam split. With a final crash, the door burst open and Boone Maddox filled the frame like a nightmare birthed from smoke, coat flapping, boots crunching, gun raised. He aimed straight at Rosalind.
"There you are," he hissed. She didn't shake, didn't blink.
"I'm not the girl you left in that cellar."
Maddox sneered. Still fat, still slow.
"And you," Rosalind said softly, "are still too stupid to realize I'm the reason you're dying tonight."
She fired. The bullet caught him in the shoulder, spinning him backward. His shot went wide, slamming into the ceiling beam instead of her chest. Kieran lunged forward with a roar, tackling the outlaw inside just as the last raider, hidden on the left side of the porch, leaned around to take aim at Kieran's back. Rosalind saw it in an instant. Kieran didn't. She didn't think. She moved. Throwing her full weight into the doorway, she slammed the door frame with her shoulder, knocking the raider's gun wide just as he fired. The bullet grazed her arm instead of burying itself in Kieran. She grunted at the pain, but stayed standing. Kieran shot the last raider in the snow.
That left only Maddox, bleeding, staggering, reaching for a fallen knife. He lifted it weakly. "Should have stayed dead, girl." Rosalind stepped in front of Kieran one last time.
"No,"
she said.
"Should have finished the job when you had the chance."
She swung the heavy rifle like a club, striking Maddox across the jaw with a crack that echoed like thunder. He fell to his knees, dazed. Kieran pressed the shotgun to Maddox's temple, but he hesitated. This wasn't his vengeance. It wasn't his ghost to bury. He looked at Rosalind. Her chest rose and fell with fury and grief and something deeper, something long overdue. She nodded. Together, they ended it. When the clearing fell quiet again, snow drifted into the cabin through the broken doorway. Kieran wrapped Rosalind's bleeding arm, hands gentle despite the violence still echoing through him. "You saved my life," he murmured. "You taught me how," she answered. He brushed a trembling thumb over her cheek. "You're safe here."
Rosalind leaned into him, exhausted, heart pounding, but unbroken.
"And is it my home? If I choose it?"
Kieran's voice softened into something that felt like a beginning. "It's your home now, if you'll have it."
Rosalind closed her eyes. For the first time since her family died, she felt warmth instead of cold, felt belonging instead of emptiness, felt hope. Outside, the storm quieted, as if the mountain itself finally exhaled.
Stories like this linger long after the last shot fades into the snow. They remind us of the weight we carry, the people we've lost, and the small, stubborn sparks of hope that refuse to die even in the darkest winters. Rosalind and Kieran survived because someone stood beside them when the world turned cruel. Because sometimes a single act of protection can change the course of a whole life. If you've listened this far, I'd love to know something. Where in the world are you hearing this story tonight? Your comments keep these frontier tales alive, and the next one is already on its way.